Hello everyone, Steelworks Ryan here. Welcome to part 2 of my top 10 favorite Thomas episodes. If you haven't already seen part 1, the link is in the description. Anyway, let's get on with the list.
Now, I know what you're thinking. What? A Brenner era episode? And this part was filmed after the whole Mattel drama at Drayton Manor happened. Well, guess what? Yes, Mattel did do all those things just for money. They did just bring a lot of characters back and do a lot of things with the current show just to get money. But guess what? It was the writers who cared about the show. It was the writers who wanted to fix the show. And Mattel might only just care about money at this point, but guess what? That doesn't change the fact that the writers took time out of their day to write beautiful episodes of the Brenner era for us. And well done, Lee Pressman. In my opinion, you wrote the best one. This episode opens with Thomas collecting some Christmas trees to take to Tidmouth for a Christmas market. However, he runs into an old friend named Terrence the Tractor, who helped him out of the snow many years ago, and they give us a whole recap of the episode. Now, some people don't like that they do this because they say it takes too much time out of the episode and there isn't enough time for overall story. But, in my opinion, I think it was kind of necessary, because it shows a flashback and shows that Thomas was in the wrong at one point. And later, in this episode, it's Terrence who's in the wrong. And this episode treats it like no laughing matter. We seriously think that Terrence is about to drown in the ice pond. Okay, Steam Team to the Rescue did confirm that vehicles can breathe underwater because they're machines, but we don't know that yet! That happens 2 years later! So the fact that they were willing to do something this dark is nothing short of amazing. And I love Thomas in this episode too. He's mature. He knows Terrence shouldn't go over the pond right away, and he immediately tries to pull him out. He doesn't say, you didn't listen to me. You can stay there. No, Thomas is smart in this episode. He knows what's right. He feels like Season 5 Thomas all over again. It's great. I also really like how Terrence was portrayed in this episode. Okay, sure, he's missing that little curl on his head, but who cares? It's still Terrence. The fact that they were willing to bring back the last character from Season 1 that hadn't returned yet is pretty great, to be honest. Not to mention, they expanded Terrence's character from the classic series. He has a big ego, which makes sense since he pulled Thomas out of the snow all those years ago. And it shows what happens when you let your ego get the better of you, when you let pride get the better of you. Pride is actually a pretty evil thing, people. Think about it. I also love how they joke around with the humans a lot in this episode. The fact that the woodsman just casually walked around the pond while Terrence just went right over it. Sir Topham Hatt getting upset because the Earl doesn't have a tree. Terrence's driver tried to connect a hook to Terrence even though the latch is right in front of him. It's just an overall great episode with dark moments, funny visuals, and not to mention, it has a really good moral attached to it that is extremely overlooked nowadays.
I thought I was being clever and I could go anywhere with my caterpillar tracks. I should have listened to my own advice. You have to be sensible if you want to stay safe.
Remember what I said about Season 5 drama? Well, guess what? That Season 5 drama got onto my top 10 favorite episodes. Originally, I would have given this spot to put upon Percy, but I like Toby and the Flood a lot more, because it does something that a lot of other episodes don't do. It starts out depressing. We know it's been raining hard for weeks, and it's really hard on everyone on Sodor. And the fact that Toby still has to go look for more damage is even more nerve-wracking. This episode is really intense at the beginning. Toby's going to inspect the dam for any damage. Why there are railway tracks on top of a dam, I'll never know, but it's still really intense. The way Toby's passing over with the water leaking through, you know something's about to go down right away. And when the dam starts leaking even more, we're all panicking. No, Toby, you're gonna die, go back! And now the story's even more intense. If the dam breaks completely, it'll flood the town. How can you get even more intense than that? I have to talk about the soundtrack. The soundtrack is so intense when the action starts building up. You literally feel like you're along for the ride and you're involved with all this chaos. It's so great. Just listen to it. I can't imagine how painful it was to film with that dam. Wait a second, Toby, why did you stop on the bridge? Did you hear the dam? Oh no, Toby, move, the bridge is breaking! No, Toby, no, Toby's floating away down the river, oh my gosh! I know how unrealistic this is. There's no way this would happen in real life. But guess what? They actually kind of make it work because Toby's made of wood and like the only metal part in him is his boiler. So it kind of makes sense for him to be the one floating away down the river. And these shots right here are absolutely amazing. How they got the water to look so murky and dark, I'll never know. Maybe it's just tomato soup. And oh my gosh, there's a waterfall? Are you kidding me? Not to mention, Harold's method to rescue Toby is extremely ridiculous, and that only adds to the fun. All Harold has to rescue Toby is one rope, and they have no idea if it's going to work or not. But guess what? The waterfall's right there. They don't have much of a choice. So, they just attach it to Toby's buffer, which is even more dangerous because it could pull Toby right off the bridge. But yet, they stick with it, knowing that this is their only chance to save their friends. And Harold's probably aware that he could accidentally pull Toby off the bridge. So he passes his rope down to little Percy, who's on the other side of the river. And now it's up to Percy to save Toby and pull him to shore. And this makes the story even more intense, because you can see how much Percy's slipping. He could just get pulled into the river too. But yet, he presses on and saves his friend. Jeez, we gotta give Percy a break. He's just going through all the trauma.
Toby was safe at last.
The narration's great too, gotta mention that. And I don't think I need to go on any longer about why I think this episode is so great. It pretty much showcased itself. It took realistic, unrealistic, combined them, and made an incredible episode. And it's such a shame that we may never see episodes like this again in this timeline anymore. But it was nice while it lasted. You know, All Let's See is an episode I didn't fully appreciate until about a year ago. I kept asking myself, why is this episode so popular? It's basically just Duck and Percy working the harbor. There is a scene where Duck takes a man to the hospital, but there's not really that much fast-paced action. So why do people like this episode so much? Well, that's because of the message. But before I talk about that, I need to talk about something else. The visuals in this episode are breathtaking. I feel like this is another reason why people like this episode so much. Just these calm shots of Duck and Percy moving trucks and coaches back and forth are just really nice, and I wouldn't be surprised if people fell asleep to montages like this and had happy dreams afterwards. But anyway, on to the message. So it actually turns out, while Duck might be a perfectionist when it comes to working on the railway, he actually has his own dreams.
I wish I could sail to faraway lands, sighed Duck.
It turns out Duck wants to do things that he can't physically do because he's a steam engine. He wants to go beyond the horizon, explore places he's never seen, and wander off, do his own thing. But he can't because he's stuck on his rails, and as Percy said,
Engines can't float.
But Duck still has his head in the clouds, wishing he could do more. And he goes on talking about it all day, much to the annoyance of Percy, who's completely happy with the life he has. Suddenly, a siren sounds saying that there's an emergency, and it turns out a man who was taking part in the boat regatta hurt his hand, and he had to be taken to the hospital by rail. So Duck hurried off to the rescue. Harold landed next to the boat dock and met up with Duck. He couldn't take the man to the hospital because he had to stay at sea in case of other emergencies. Duck collected the passenger and hurried off for Lower Sudbury, where Birdie the bus would be waiting to take the man the rest of the way. And while racing down the line, Duck realized something. His rails were taking him exactly where he needed to go, and he didn't need to worry about turns or rough waves. His rails were smooth, and they took him right to Lower Sudbury, where Birdie was waiting to take the man to the hospital. Once Duck arrives, Birdie pulls up, and the man thanked him for such a smooth ride.
You look splendid flying along the line, Duck, glowed Bertie. No wonder they call you Great Western. Thank you, Bertie. Percy's right, he thought to himself. Engines are happiest when their wheels are firmly on the rails.
Duck learned something that day. While he could still dream of doing more and being something he wasn't, he would never actually need to be the thing he wasn't. Because he was a steam engine, for a reason. God made it that way. If Duck wasn't meant to be a steam engine, he wouldn't be a steam engine. And that lesson applies to every one of us. We are who we are for a reason. We don't need to change anything about ourselves from the day we're born. Because guess what? God designed us that way. And while there's nothing wrong with dreaming, some dreams are better left as not reality.
Duck still wonders about the lands beyond the horizon, but he enjoys being with friends most of all, and I think he knows that sometimes the best travels are those we can only dream about. Don't you?
If I had to describe Cranky Bugs in one word, that word would be balanced. Why? Well, I'm more of a comedy guy when it comes to TV, but this episode takes everything that Thomas is good at. Comedy, drama, a good story, and combines them all into one episode, and the end result was great. This was the first episode of Season 5, and in my opinion, it's the best one. It has little character development moments, Sir Topham Hatt accidentally scolding Thomas and Percy even though they did nothing wrong and then apologizing later, Thomas and Percy being the mature ones, and the new crane on the dock just being the annoying one who doesn't know what he's doing. It's just an overall really fun episode. And not to mention, there are little details in this episode that I never actually noticed until my latest rewatch. For example, after Cranky drops the load here, you can see a random workman just standing behind Thomas, just like, what happened? It's just like so random, yet so funny. And the storm scene, while it does use some stock footage from previous episodes, the shots that we do get are breathtaking. There are just these shots of the ship just sailing along out of nowhere, and then it just crashes into the dock. You never know what's gonna happen next, and not to mention, it knocks over the shed and sends Cranky plummeting to the ground. And then, right as you think it's just gonna be a tragic state, it's comic relief!
Help! Call the engines from inside the shed. I can't! Called Cranky.
Both US and UK dubs of the show handle this episode beautifully with the narration. Thomas and Percy come to the rescue, they put Cranky back on his feet, Cranky cleans up the mess, and he apologizes for being rude.
However, you two mites are in my way, so move over. Pa, said Percy, he's back to bugging us. You're still attached to Cranky. But it was too late.
And the moral of the story is, always treat others with respect, or else you'll get bitten by caterpillars. Before I go to the number 1 spot, I'm just going to give some quick honorable mentions that didn't quite make the list, but I still really enjoy to this day. No Place Like Home. Great visuals, great music, and a really nice story where we learn that Victor would do anything to help Kevin. Duncan Gets Spooked. Without a doubt the darkest episode of the entire show, and it's actually one that I had a nightmare about. And that says something, it shows that Thomas is more than a kid show. Mucking About. The story isn't the best, but I really like that character development that Thomas has when he talks to Edward. And there's always something so satisfying about seeing the pack on screen. I don't know what it is, it's just really cool to watch those machines do their thing. So I'm really glad they brought them back for CGI. Put Upon Percy. I wouldn't be surprised if this episode was the reason why Percy was always so nervous in later seasons. I mean, he almost got buried alive, I wouldn't blame him. And this episode shows Season 5 Percy at his worst, and then he gets karma for taking his anger out on the trucks. And later he redeems himself by saving his crew. So it overall feels like a really finished episode, and Percy finally gets a break from all the hard work he does, which he's been needing for so long, to be honest. Love Me Tender. Really nice spotlight episode for Donald and Douglas to welcome them back to the series, and the heroic scene at the end where one goes to rescue the other is also really nice. Trouble in the Shed. A nice relaxing episode where we're introduced to Percy and also know that the 3 big engines learned their lesson for being so childish. Wayward Winston. A really fun runaway sequence, and it's finally acknowledged in CGI that the engine's drivers do actually have a purpose other than standing there for detail. Something Fishy. A really nice episode to conclude Arthur's short character arc, and in my opinion, this is how Thomas should have been handled in all the Hit era episodes where he wasn't on his branch line. He just gets thrown into a situation he's completely unfamiliar with because Sir Topham Hatt wants to give that part of the island more attraction. New crane on the dock. This basically feels like a Season 5 episode except a lot more cartoony, and I'm honestly okay with that. The animation gags were funny, and the scene with Big Mickey at the end was a nice surprise. Old Iron. Great character moments and runaway sequence, and I really like that bond we have between James and Edward by the end. And my overall favorite episode of the entire show is Percy's Promise. Yeah, Mr. Steam 2010, you got it right. Now don't let the opening of this episode fool you. While it might start out as a calm, relaxing, everyday summer episode, it transitions into something much bigger. The episode starts with Thomas taking the vicar's children to the seaside for a lovely day at the beach. He runs into Percy, and Percy wishes that he could pull children instead of dirty old stone cars. Thomas tells Percy that he could take the children home at the end of the day if he liked, and Percy promises to do a good job and get them there safely. However, later that day, Harold and Edward warned Percy that there was bad weather coming and he should be careful when taking the children home. But Percy wasn't worried. He was determined to keep his promise.
Ugh, he shivered and thought of his nice dry shed.
After collecting all the passengers, Percy sets off into the wind and rain, and he's determined not to let anything beat him. All he wants is to get these passengers safely to their destination at their little branch line.
Percy struggled on past coastal villages and into the countryside. The river was rising fast. I wish I could see, complained Percy as he battled against the rain. More trouble lay ahead. Oh, hissed Percy, the water is sloshing my fire.
Percy was stuck in the flooded river, and it took some time to find firewood to get his fire going again. However, Percy wasn't all alone.
Something thudded onto Percy's boiler. Ow!
Harold had dropped hot drinks for Percy's driver and firemen so they would have the courage to keep going. And with everyone feeling better, Percy pressed on towards the station, and no matter how many times his wheels slipped, he just wouldn't stop. He was determined to keep that promise and get the passengers home.
I promised, he panted. I promised. He made one more big effort, and at last, exhausted but triumphant, he brought the train home. Well done, Percy, cheered Thomas. You kept your promise, despite everything.
Yes, despite everything. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Let me explain why I like this episode so much. In the beginning, we're probably all thinking that Percy only agreed to take the train because he said he wanted to pull passengers. But strangely enough, he promised to do a good job with the passengers. I mean, if he was taking the passengers in the rain, most people would probably just be like, yeah, it's raining, I'm dropping out of this job, I'm giving the passengers to the bus. But no, Percy promises to do a good job. And after he promises, he doesn't let any words of warning drag him down. He will not stop until he gets that train to its destination, like he said he was going to do. Percy's leading by example here. He said he was going to do something, so he knows that he has to do it. In nowadays society, it's so easy for us to say something that we're gonna do and then we never actually go through with it. But we should go through with what we say. And do you want to know why? Because if we don't, nothing will ever get done. And again, looking back, Percy didn't have to promise that he would get the passengers home. He could have just said, I'll do my best. But no, he promises that he will get those passengers home. He will get them home. And when everything in the world comes crashing down on top of him and extinguishes the one thing that's keeping him moving, he doesn't give up. Sure, he takes a little while to get going again, but he doesn't give up. He promised he would get the passengers home, and he does. This is such a good example for all of us. When we say we want to do something, we just gotta do it! Harold even put aside his rivalry with Percy to help him, and while the rivalry doesn't entirely end until season 20, it's still really nice knowing that he was willing to put their differences aside just to help his friend. Well, almost friend.
I don't know what you two get up to sometimes, but I do know that you're a really useful engine. Oh, sir, whispered Percy happily.
And that's why Percy's Promise is my favorite episode. Also mic change. And that's everything, guys. Those are my top 10 favorite episodes. Top 20 if you count the honorable mentions, but What are your guys' favorite episodes? Let me know down in the comments. I know at least one person's gonna say Wonky Whistle or Up and Away, but anyway. Will I do more videos like this? Not at the moment. Right now I'm more interested in working on Spectres of Sodor and getting that out of the way. I am going to try really hard to get at least 5 episodes done before the 78th anniversary, but maybe I will, maybe I won't. We don't know yet. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and there's nothing left to do but say my catchphrase. I have nothing else to say, but goodbye everyone.